Hi, I'm Joe DiMatteo of the Len and Joe Ask the Pharmacist radio broadcast. Thanks for tuning in again with us today. I have a topic that I'd like to talk to you about: diabetes prevention. How do we prevent diabetes? I'll give you some details a little bit later on how you can reach us through our websites, etc., or through our radio broadcast and toll-free numbers. But I want to get right into the meat of this. Type 2 diabetes. How do we prevent that? It's a huge problem today. A significant portion of our population right now, the American population, is what we would call insulin resistant. I will explain. Many folks moving closer and closer towards type 2 diabetes, unawares. Many folks perceive that they go to the doctor one day, they have blood work done, and it's as though they just caught type 2 diabetes. You didn't just catch this disorder. In many cases, it's been developing, and it's a metabolic process. It's a metabolic abnormality. There's something afoot. There's something running afoot in your body, in your life, what you're doing, what you're consuming, what you're not doing, what you're not consuming, that is leading to that. I believe there's a lot of issues that can predispose you: family histories, genetic predispositions, how you eat, your weight, your lean muscle mass to fat ratio, your hip to waist ratio. That we have a lot of central adiposity. No doubt about it that the more weight that we have in through the waistline, more visceral fat, the higher the rate of type 2 diabetes. I'm going to introduce you to another concept as well, type 1.5 diabetes. So let's go back to the beginning. Type 1 diabetes would be where there's been some trauma or destruction, autoimmune, self-attack. There's some literature that talks about bacterial viral assaults to the pancreatic, where there's pancreatic destruction of the islet cells in the pancreas. That's type 1 diabetes, meaning that there's literally, at a said point in time, there's virtually very little, if any, production of insulin to balance your blood sugar. Type 2 diabetes is more one that is a process that evolves in your life, takes place over time. You kind of work towards that, unfortunately. Bad choice of words, but you work towards that. Type 1.5 that has now been introduced in the last few years, 3 to 4 to 5 years, is talking about that maybe there's an immune component to this as well, and not just a lifestyle. In other words, the process that you've been working at, unfortunately, to move towards development of type 2 diabetes. But many folks are. So let's just get into the basics of this. I'm going to give you some real hardcore basics, I believe some tips to prevent, but let's talk a little bit more about the type 2 diabetes itself. Probably the biggest factor, waist to hip ratio. Number 2, genetic disposition would certainly play in there. Visceral fat, and certainly overall increase in body mass, high fat, as opposed to lean muscle mass. Obesity plays the number one, and is probably the central role here. How does this occur over time, the development of type 2 diabetes? In the quick, what's happening is we consume way too many processed refined flours, not enough fiber, not enough antioxidants in the diet to protect the pancreas. We do not consume enough of the right types of fats. We eat way too many deep-fried, rancid fats that are pro-inflammatory. We don't consume enough of the right types of fats: extra virgin olive oil, quality omega-3, 800 type fish oils, that they're non-rancid, molecularly distilled oils. So we start to move and develop this process. Too much white, too much refined, not enough fiber. Blood sugars are spiking. Blood sugars spike, and what happens? What happens? Well, I went to the doctor, had blood work done, and my blood sugar was okay. They told me, oh, I know I'm overweight, I need to lose a few pounds, etc. My blood sugars are fine. What's happening is your pancreas is overworking. It is producing a tremendous amount of insulin to counteract the blood sugar spikes. Well, unfortunately, over the course of time, you develop a resistance. Your insulin effectiveness literally begins to diminish. More insulin being produced, less efficiency. Feedback mechanism is produce more in order to maintain the blood glucose within a normal range, but I'm producing way too much insulin. I become more and more resistant. Eventually, the pancreas burns out. Type 2 diabetes, development of type 2. So that's what I meant when I said you're working towards it. Type 1.5 would say I could have some underlying issues. I could have some tendencies towards autoimmune types of issues. I can have an immune derangement that predisposes me. So I can have a little bit of a type 1 component, but I've really abused myself in this scenario of working towards type 2 diabetes and developing type 2 diabetes because of my poor diet. So let's get into the basics. What are some of the basic tips that we can talk about that I think that you need to know about? Number one, you should have a 25-OH-D level done. We know that vitamin D is an immune modulator. That's a whole nother discussion. Modulates the immune system. It is an immune stimulant. It can raise up the immune activity, but it also has a modulating effect on the immune system, more of a regulant type of effect. Vitamin D status is critical. Number two, a low glycemic load diet. We must take into account that we must know the amount of fiber that is in the foods that we consume, not just the amount of carbohydrate. We should know the amount of carbohydrates, but how much of that is fibrous. We must consume, as Americans, we consume nowhere near enough fiber. Why is that important? Because if I have blood sugars because of a white, refined flour, refined sugar, highly processed diet where blood sugars are spiking and doing this, as opposed to one that is richer in fibers containing foods like oatmeal, Ezekiel bread that is a completely unrefined carbohydrate-based type of grain, multiple grains, higher in protein, more vegetables, fibers-containing vegetables, broccolis, cauliflower, zucchinis, peppers, etc. More vegetables, fibrous-containing foods will cause this peak to be dumbed down to more of a hump, rounded curve, spike in blood sugar as opposed to peaks. Less peaks I have, the better off I am. How do I do that? Adequate amount of protein, balanced off with a significant amount of fiber should be a part of each meal. It's the type of choices that you make. We must make sure that we eat reasonable, smaller, more frequent meals. We should eat 3 reasonable meals a day with a quality snack or 2. We shouldn't go long, extended periods of time and antagonize our pancreas and not eat for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. So that's the basic. Have a 25-OH-D level down. We need to be somewhere in that 40 to 60 nanogram per deciliter. You can go to our website. You can contact us directly. I'll give you that information about the specifics of that. Low glycemic load diet. Number 2, we've got to improve lean muscle mass to fat ratio. In other words, we have to lose weight. We're obese technically as a population. If we're not obese, we're just entirely too overweight. Not enough physical activity. We need to have 30 to 40 minutes at a minimum, maybe 5 days a week of brisk walking, brisk activity. If not that, a couple of days of that and a couple of days a week of resistance type training. We must build muscle mass to improve the efficiency and the sensitivity of our muscles and our organs and our tissues to burn glucose. It's critical. A quality multiple vitamin, daily essentials that is rich in antioxidants. Why? There's a lot of oxidative stress and damage that takes place to the pancreas with type 2 diabetes, even technically type 1.5 as well as type 1. I've mentioned fiber. We consume small amounts of fiber in this country. We need to be somewhere between 35 and 50 grams a day of total fiber. Total. I don't want to get into all the details. We've got a refined, so I don't want to, I just don't have the time to. We've got to reduce the amount of white refined. We've got to be on quality omega 800s. We've got to be on quality omega-3 fish oils to reduce pro-inflammatory proteins. Our fat cells produce adipokines, pro-inflammatory cytokines, pro-inflammatory proteins that can antagonize insulin resistance, make us more resistant to our own blood sugar or insulin hookup, encourage more trauma and damage. Omega-3s in quality doses, along with reducing the wrong types of fats in your diet, can be critical to you here. Quality antioxidants, buffered C ascorbates, quality E's like a perfect E, a quality multiple like daily essentials. Last point, this is the 10th point, believe it or not, free radical elimination. Free radicals mean that literally we steal electrons. We create free radical damage. Antioxidants help to reduce that. Folks, hopefully you learned something today about type 2 diabetes prevention. You can reach us at lenandjoe.com or at our toll-free number 877-275-7743 or at mscompounding.com. Have a great day.